We're a group of Gen Xers learning about our ADHD and neurodiversity later in life. Join us as we discuss interesting clips we find online and how they relate to our own life experiences. Welcome to This Is How My Brain Works.
So it's my turn to share. This is a clip from an awesome, I think they're married. They're on Instagram and TikTok for sure. I'm not sure about YouTube. And they're ADHD love. I love watching their stuff because it's like watching me and my husband talk about things, even though we both actually have two different styles of neurodivergence. It's still very much in line with that. So the one thing I couldn't get on this clip, because it cuts it off in the very beginning, is he's essentially asking the question, and it's important to the clip. He's essentially asking the question, or he's making the statement, I should say, that it doesn't bother him when he's interrupted. Okay. And so now I'm going to share my screen.
Break focus and then go back to it.
So that is wild to me, okay? Because when I've got focus, there is slime connecting my brain to what I'm doing, like this thin layer of slime with loads of nerve endings on it. No, I'm trying to explain.
No, you're
Don't
doing
laugh.
great job.
So there's neurons in it, it's buzzing, and it's like bio, yeah?
Like a neural network.
Like a neural network. You come and you talk to me,
Right.
and it's like you're going,
Snip.
you snip the slime, like I've lost it. So the reason I'm raging is like, oh my God, the slime, I've lost my network, I need to put it back together.
A wire might be a better analogy than slime.
What's wrong with slime?
I don't think it conducts anything.
I've got an example though where I think I could make you rage. I wouldn't do it on purpose, obviously.
Go on.
You get incredibly focused when you play golf. If I was to come up to you mid-golf game and tap you on the shoulder when you were like planning out a shot with an iron and go, babe, I'm making dinner, what do you want?
No, it'd be fine. I mean, as long as it wasn't mid-swing. Do you know what I mean? If like the club head wasn't both then, because that's just like,
Right.
that's different.
Right.
That's like just putting me off.
That's it. Hyperfocus for me is a permanent mid-swing, you in golf. That mode when you can't hear anything
Right.
else, can't think about anything else, total focus.
That's helpful.
Is it?
Yeah.
Being a huge point of conversation in my family this week.
That has,
Mm-hmm.
and as just like, is there like a argument about it, or
How?
is there just conversation about it?
It's a conversation about how when you have two ADHD or neurodivergent people working from home, he has an idea and wants to share it immediately. I'm hyper focused and want to kill him.
Right. Right.
And I get such little hyper focus time because I'm constantly picking up kids or dropping kids or stopping to make dinner or like whatever the mom piece of the puzzle is too. So no, we've had very like good conversations, very similar to this of understanding, but it's like hyperfocus has become, which is a state that I love to be in, has recently become like a unicorn. And we've had to renegotiate how the house works so that I can get back to a space of being there, because it's starting to make me angry and depressed to never have it.
I can
Yes.
hear it in your voice that it's
Yeah.
been for you.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
sorry.
And then the guilt that comes along with then like having that moment of going like, oh, I snapped at them because they interrupted me and now I feel bad. Now I've got to stop what I'm doing and go in and say, I'm so sorry, I shouldn't have tapped at you. What do you really need? Okay, great. Like then all that kicks in too. So
The idea of that impulsivity, it is weird. It does kind of take you over. And it's hard to really do anything else because the need is so great to share the information or do the thing. It's disruptive because it's like nothing else can really get done until that is shared or done, whatever that thing is. And it's dominating. It's like it's a force that kind of like, it's a driving force. It's like this intrinsic motivation thing that just dominates. And what but because I recognize that, but I also recognize, Krista, what you're saying as far as when you are hyper focused, or like, let's say I'm doing like the let's doing something like the books or the accounting or whatever. So I'm on the app and I'm trying to classify, like, okay, was this a, you know, clothing or a restaurant, or what is this thing? And then someone comes in and asks me a question to go to pull out of that thing, which I'm already in. She's talking about that slime, to cut the slime and then deal with something else that's going to also take energy, and then to come back to this and then like reconnect that thing, because nothing is in a habit loop. It's all like, okay, I have to like try to get back to that point of where I was, and it's going to take a little bit of effort.
Yeah, and I was laughing at him mansplaining her slime analogy because as not good. Really? No, and then he kind of caught himself. But the reason I actually particularly like the slime analogy is, or you know what else I think would be effective is if you've ever played with that magnetic sand, or those magnetic little diamond shaped pieces, because our concentration is like, you have to extend it and extend it and extend it and layer the slime to get it to reach all the way to the computer. And then once you've got that connection, that flow, that zone, that unicorn that you're looking for, Krista, the cutting of it isn't, the time it takes to destroy that connection is so minuscule as compared to the time it takes to build it.
It's like a physiological wound or hurt. It's like you feel it in your body. It's not like an annoyance. It's like it's like your
Visceral.
being.
Well, you mentioned like accounting, but for me, it's the creative space. It's like,
But
it's
any,
like, for example,
any connection to that flow.
totally. But when I, like this morning, I was brainstorming for a client and I was like totally in this flow, and I hit that time blindness hit. Man, that's really feeling good about it. And I look up and I'm 5 minutes late on getting in my car to go get my kid. And so, so now all of that creativity that was like really just buzzing and going and coming up with some really great options for that client halted in a moment. And that's like, it's like catching rainbows sometimes. You really have to, when those things hit. So I'm literally in the car driving, like frantically giving myself some voice notes of things that are still coming, percolating up as I'm in the car, in hopes that I can still capture a little bit more of the glitter before it all dissipates. And I can't get back to it.
Like, what an abrupt transition from feeling like purpose driven and good, and you're in a flow state or whatever, and you're like, so you have all those things going on, the endorphins and whatnot. Mm-hmm. And then like, I'm 5 minutes late. Oh my God, I'm a bad mom. And you're picturing your kid waiting and worrying and all this kind of stuff. And now you're feeling like, whatever it is, inept or a bad mom, or, so then you have that feeling about yourself. So you have this one extreme feeling about yourself, and then it's just like halted. And now it's replaced by this other feeling about yourself. And that's like a roller coaster. Did
you feel bad that you were late for your kid?
Not so much for this one, because he's 17, he'll be fine. But if we were young, and he understands me, and if he understands me, but if they were younger, that is what I would have felt. And but I also think it's really just I don't know, like it's what Greg and I decided last week. It was really his idea, actually, is he said, if 4 out of 5 days of the week we could give you a 5-hour block, would that help? And so we negotiated how to change our schedule around so that I could 4 days a week have a 5-hour block. And of course, this week, like the washer broke, like things happened and it didn't quite happen. When I've got to now fly to LA next week all of a sudden, and that turned, so it didn't quite happen. But there is a promise of that we have created those blocks of time, and so that's pretty magical to think about. And this is the first time, I mean, well, since COVID, we have worked in the same house really, but I've always had a place to go. I've always had someplace else to go. And I think that the challenge of being a parent, because I don't want to make it gender specific, and working at home is that they don't see it as work. They just see you as home.
Yeah.
And you're working, but you're not at work. I mean, so that's training that we've had to do in the house of like what at work looks like so that I can not be interrupted every 2 seconds.
That's a tricky
I
one.
find fear works really well in that.
What is
Fear.
fear? Well,
Get
so
real angry whenever they interrupt you in a certain spot in the
my
house.
wife can. My
When the
wife
door is
can.
closed and you've told them 6 or 7 times. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say my wife can go in and out of things much easier. In fact, I'm kind of in awe of it. Like she will be working, and in the middle of a complex thought, communicating it, and a kid will go. One of our kids. So I have younger kids. That's why, Krista, I was thinking in those terms. But they'll go into the office, and she's able to turn and be like, "Oh, what is it, sweetie?" Like she's able to actually give proper energy and response to the kid instead of like go through that like, "Oh my God, I'm being interrupted," and like, and having that kind of response in your body of now having to shift to something else, which is where I get. And so I would be irritated. Like, what is it you need? I'm in a meeting, or like when daddy's in here, you have to not come in. And so my response would be more like that rather than inviting. And I'm like, pretty amazed that Ginger can be in that, like switch gears like that. And then I'm on the other side, like, okay, I'm trying to get this kid ready to go to school because then I want to then move on and do my things. Because like we have said just now, like the time is precious. And so, but then I also have these guilty feelings of like, you know what, just enjoy this time with your child. You can get them to school and still like value this time and not be totally impatient and irritated that she's going back into the office for the 3rd time. And so there's that whole dance too that's going on in my head as far as like this sense of urgency of getting a child to school, going in and out of that office. And, but the fact that like my wife can, if she gets interrupted, she can come out of it and go back into it. Her brain can do that.
Yeah.
And
Well, and similar to their conversation, when I finally recently, I think, isolated what was hurting my heart over time. I mean, I was able to say to him, because Greg is ADHD and understands hyperfocus and is a musician, and so I was able to say to him, what does it look like if I just barge in to the studio in the middle of a take and say something like, hey, don't forget the trash has got to go next week or whatever, and he gets it, which is great. But it was and it was a really good take. I mean, that's what I was like, and it was a really good take. Like, what does that look like?
Yep.
And so similar to her golf analogy, which actually my husband's a golfer, he would understand that one too. It was, I think that here's the truth of the matter. Like, I think the mom in the house, often, at least in my household, has been the one to sort of Greg always says she's the Julie McCoy of the family. For those of you who are old enough, you will know that reference. And so he's always been used to me being able to be like, okay, no problem. We got it. It's like that but now that the kids are older and I have room and I've gone back into my creative life, I don't do that as easily. for many reasons. I'm older. I like just lots of reasons. And so we're having to he's used to seeing me do a certain thing, and or the focus is not as much on the kids in the schedule as it was when they were younger. Now it's on my film and other things. And so we're just having to, I think, to renegotiate too what this looks like now.
Yeah, I was, as we're all talking, I'm like laughing because we're each answering from the season of life that we are in with our children.
True.
Even though we are all of the same sort of generation and late adopters of ADHD.
Love that.
Wow.
But, so like, and then, when you say it doesn't seem to affect Ginger, maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. I do know that for me, when my kids were that age, I knew developmentally it was imperative that I send the message that they were the way that dogs react when we enter a room. That's kind of how parenting, the primary caregiver should be when their kid comes around. You are so excited to see them that no, there is no take that's too perfect that you wouldn't, of course, stop it and say, "Hey, cutie, what you need? You want to go make a peanut butter and jelly with me? Oh, let's put banana in it." Like that's that connection that we're trying to get our kids. And so then as they get older and the door is closed and they know it's our office and we are working and we are maybe having a hormonal shift in our life such that our ADHD that has been undiagnosed is much harder to manage. So it's like, you guys are old enough to get the egg out of my but then thinking back, my 13-year-old, for you, Michael, you were mentioning getting your kids ready on time. How old are they again?
10 and 4.
Okay. Both are old enough to read digital watches, right? And or in fact, you get the 4-year-old the digital and the 10-year-old the hands, and then they wear their watch every day. I forgot how fucking effective that is because I got one when I was 10 and suddenly was like up every day and at school on time. 4th grade, I was never late, nor 5th grade and going onwards. But we got my 13-year-old to watch, and she is notorious for being late to wake up, late in the morning, screams at me, is a jerk off. Like she just is very dysregulated in the morning. It's going on 3 days. That watch is a miracle. A miracle. Like there have been no arguments. The mornings have been like this. I have no idea where this world came from, but I'm going to live in it with gratitude and like joy and probably a lot of silliness because suddenly I'm able to tell jokes again without getting yelled at in the morning. So get your kids a watch.
Yeah, well, Gus does have a watch. He is still pretty hard to get out of bed.
Or maybe an alarm clock.
He's got an alarm clock.
This is my youngest.
It's just we're trying it all. He does read. He's a reader, and it's hard to get him to shut off the light, stop reading. Like he'll read.
Well, that's actually amazing for a boy. Count your lucky stars. They don't like to read like that. So that's awesome.
Right. So I am very happy about that. And it's what's interesting is like, because, when your kids, you are developing, you start looking at them and saying, what are their sensitivities or are they neurodiverse and all of this. And reading was hard for me. I didn't like reading because it was just, I'd have to reread the paragraph 3 times before it was sticky enough for me to move on. I'd have to, and if there was a little noise, I'd have to reread the sentence. So reading was just, it wasn't as fun. Where he just plows through something. He's got amazing recall, which I didn't have that either. But he is a sensitive kid, So I'm not in a hurry to like label him or anything, but I do want to be able to parent who that child is. And then Sarah, as you're talking, like you need to embrace your kid as they walk in the room. I'm like, well, might have to do a little damage control on some of this because.
By the way, I only discovered that when my kids were older, and I've been using it with them at 12 plus, and it still works.
Yeah.
And and I see it making a difference. And so anyway, Like, don't, please don't be judged by thinking that I ever did it right. No, everything I say is hard-earned information that I have used that has helped me.
Well, I had therapy today, and there was an exercise I did where I was looking at a 5-year-old picture of myself. Margot's 4, and then Gus is 10, and you're like, wow, these imprints got made so early, and these kids are having their own imprints, and there's just kind of that like, hope I'm not screwing them up too bad or whatever. I do let my kids know that I have ADHD, that I do go talk to someone about how my brain works and all that. So,
listen, I think the best thing that we ever did was to, because both Greg and I can be explosive at times. I don't mean explosive like physically or whatever, but just sort of like, oh my God, what? Like we both can have these moments.
Clearly emotionally dysregulated in a way that might be frightening for our children under our care. Yeah.
And so I've always just embraced the idea, like the best thing that we can do is to just talk to them about it afterwards and let them know what it is, and also just apologize and ask for forgiveness and let them know, Cash and I got into it badly this weekend, my 14-year-old, because he was desperate to go to the mall, and it was the day that it was like 1 degree and snowing. And he was meeting all of these other kids at the mall, and I was waiting for one parent to be like, we're not doing it.
yeah.
And I ended up having to be the parent, which means I was the jerk, and I had to, like, I got him in the car. We drove around the block so I could show him it would take an hour to get to the stupid mall if we went. Like, it was just the fight of probably the biggest fight we've had in a really long time. He's crying, he's angry at me, like, I mean, all the things. And I'm just like, and I started off strong, and then it just devolved into like it just devolved.
Oh my God, you do that again, because you had very little sound but lots of movement, and I felt it.
So then but then after we both all calmed down and I said no, and then of course all the other kids were like, thank God we're not doing that. He came in, he was like, everybody was, said it was kind of dangerous if we would have gone, so it was okay, like whatever. And we were able to have like that conversation where you come and say, I was a jerk, and I was able to say to him, listen, when I get like that so many times, so much is because I want to please you. I want you to be able to support and offer you the ways to do the things you want to do. And when I can't, I get very frustrated and mad at myself and at the situation and whatever. So we were able to have a really good, healthy conversation about it. And to which he gave me a high five and said, sometimes we're all douchebags. So that was awesome. And
oh my God, that's classic.
But yes, I'm high fiving my kid all the time now. And but it was, I think that's sometimes the most important piece of the puzzle is, it's sort of like I was talking to a young person I know who, she broke up with her boyfriend recently, and she said, I just want us always to be happy. And I was like, well, I got to tell you, that is not what marriage is about. Marriage is like family. It's not always about being happy. You're going to hurt each other. It's about how you work through the stuff and continue to talk. So I think, whatever shame or guilt or whatever we feel for those moments that we lose it, we redeem ourselves, I think, and being willing to be vulnerable, open, and talk about it with our family.
Yeah,
so.
For sure. That's what, my therapist will, I'll bring examples like that, Krista, and she'll say, I don't think your kid's going to need therapy over this, because she sees my concern, but she said exactly that. She said it's all about the repair that you do with them after.
So 5 more minutes. I just want to mark that because I said I would, and I stopped the timer. So we have 5 more minutes. So do we have any closing thoughts?
Yeah. I thought it was interesting. I really did like her analogy of the piece of slime, because it was that, connectivity to something. And I even said the word stickiness. Maybe that was influenced by her slime example, but like, and it is interesting watching the non-ADHD or taking that information and personalize it. Like, well, that's not a connect. There's no connectivity to a slime or whatever. If he's talking about electrical connectivity or something, I'm not sure, but
It's not rational
bringing in
because
his
there's
own example of it,
yeah.
it's more like this. And Sarah, as you said, like the mansplaining piece, I think, and that's where an ADHDer might be sensitive and feel misunderstood if you were like, no, it's not. It's more like this. It's like, well, you might have your own experience, or you might relate to a different analogy, but here's my experience, and this is the way I'm seeing it. And I have seen that couple before, and I think they are great, and he is pretty amazing as far as validating her experience. But that was kind of an interesting thing that you caught there, Sarah.
I mean, it was a micro moment, not a microaggression. Like it was because she rolled with it so beautifully that you could tell they both it wasn't an issue. But
well, the thing that I thought was actually funny about it is that is so a conversation that would happen with my kid who is on spectrum. He would be like, no, it's not slime. There's no connectivity in slime.
That's how I read
that. And I had this moment where he says he's neurotypical. Really? Like that is such a neurodivergent thing to do.
Now, I will say that neurodivergent way of that he seemed to like that. No, that's not slime, which you could see that intent versus impact. The impact still matters. So at a certain point, I do hope that a conversation could be had with all of us when we sort of mansplain or don't ask a curious question like, why do you call it slime? That seems, anathema to me or antithetical to me or whatever.
Yeah.
But I loved that clip, and I love those two, and pretty much everything they posted, I've tried to watch it because I find that, they really crystallized like how to empathize with the other side, which is, here's how to see it and listen long enough.
The interesting thing from what I know of them, they have their book and everything as well. And Krista, you said, yeah, he identifies as neurotypical. And I think he is a very, empathetic partner to her. When you do have the two neurodiverse partners in the relationship, and then I would include trauma in with that too, even though that might not technically be considered neurodivergent. It's like there's things that show up that are very similar as far as like it's
particularly complex PTSD.
There you go. Yeah. And so
yeah,
like that can be a more complex relationship, and so like all the more important to kind of identify some of these things that come up and why. And it takes a long time in personal experience to move into that acceptance of that and moving out of reactivity and defensiveness and trying to prove your point.
So what I love, and what I love about them, and we'll wrap it up, is that it's done with humor and care and love, and so they're also just incredibly entertaining to watch, informative and entertaining. Favorite thing ever, right? So that's ADHD Love, TikTok and Instagram. Apparently they have a book, which I didn't know, but now I want to read it. And that's my time, y'all.
If you like this episode of This Is How My Brain Works, please like, subscribe, and share. For more info on today's clip, the hosts, and our podcast, check out the show notes. Thanks for listening.